Hi there, my name is Charles Thomas, and I want to welcome you to my tutorial for showing you how to export objects from ZBrush and use them in Unity3D, and also to bring them back in again and edit them. The reason I wanted to do this originally myself is because I'm working on some concepts in Unity3D, and I also love working in ZBrush as an artist with the artistic workflow that it has. And it really becomes annoying when you have to take your models and spend a lot of time in something like 3D Studio Max or Blender or Maya unwrapping the UVs and retopologizing, things like that. It really breaks up the creative workflow. Now, I do understand that if you're making production-ready assets, that some of this will need to be done, and that can't be helped, but that's okay, because by that time all of the creative work should already be done, and then you just need to clean things up and get them ready to publish. But while you're in the middle of your creative workflow, it's really not something you want to be dealing with, and ZBrush is really great about trying to minimize those things for you. So to start with, I've got this model here that I've worked with in ZBrush. And it's really just a doodle. It's nothing in particular, just something to export so that it can be seen clearly. It's got some angles. I created this with the ZModeler brush, which is a lot of fun just to doodle with and push and pull polygons around. And you can come up with some interesting shapes. I don't know what this type of object might be, maybe some sort of transformer generator or a big building. Doesn't matter. For the sake of this, it's good. I will show you that the base mesh that's going to be exported into Unity is like this. Here's the poly framing. It's very low poly, about 160 points. And I have several subdivision levels on it. First of all, I'm going to go to the ZPlugin and show you the unwrap on it. So let's find out. And sometimes if you might run into this, if you've got an object that is already subdivided, you can't edit the UVs directly on that. I've already done the UVs on this, but I really want to show them to you and make a few comments about them. So if we just go into here and click Work on Clone, it'll make a clone for us that has no subdivisions, and then we can copy back and forth. So if I go ahead and flatten this, let's take a look. There. So there's the flattened view. And, you know, that's actually pretty ugly. That is has a lot more rounding to it than I would like. ZBrush isn't going to be able to give you perfect UVs, but you can actually get a lot better than this. Let me show you a little trick that I use a lot. And that is a lot of times with objects that are not organic, you will want things to be flattened out as much as possible based on a straight camera shot. The best way that I've found for this is to go into polygroups and to do group by normals. So if we group by normals here, then it lays everything out based on its normal, the direction of the surface normal. So things get grouped together that are connected and are all facing the same direction. Now, the way that helps us then is when we go into Unwrap, we can turn on polygroups, and it will keep polygroups all together. So let's flatten this out. There you go. Okay, so that is, in my opinion, a much better UV unwrap. It's still not perfect, still not exactly what we would desire if I were making perfect game-ready, publish-ready content, but it's pretty good. And maybe in another tutorial, I might go in here and show how you can actually use this to edit the UVs, because the fact that people don't know as much is that you can actually use your regular move brush and rotate things like that to actually move these UVs around. and place them how you want. But let's go ahead and unflatten. Let's copy the UVs, go back to our original object, go back and let's paste the UVs. There we go. Now this object has the UVs that we just created in the clone object. All right, now we're ready to actually export this into Unity3D. So, reviewing here real quick, we've got an object that has a very low poly version of it. We have, there's the low poly version. We've got subdivisions on top of that with lots of ZBrush detail, both painting and a little bit of sculpting there. It has no texture map, that's all poly paint. And we want to take this into Unity3D. So, the first thing that we want to do is come up here to ZPlugin. And here we have the multi-map exporter. I've already got it open, but I'll close it there so you can see that it's buried down there under FBX multi-map exporter. So, whoops, that went away. The multi-map exporter is a great script that basically does all of the things that you would do manually if you used all of these other tools for importing or exporting maps. So down here you've got all these export things, and you've got texture map, ways that you can create maps, and then you can save them out. And those are all great, except that when you've got an object that you want to get to a game engine, that can take a lot of time. It can definitely break up your workflow. Maybe not as much as pulling it into another package, but it still definitely breaks up the flow. So, back to the ZPlugin here. I'm going to go ahead and point out just a couple of things here. First of all, at the top here, it shows what maps you're actually going to export. We want a normal map. We want a texture map from PolyPaint. We want ambient occlusion because with the new Unity3D physically based rendering, that is one of the standard maps we'll want. And we definitely want to export the map, or the mesh. Down here with the maps, right now I'm going to leave it at 1024. That seems about right, especially for just playing with things. I'm going to leave everything else pretty much the same. So once all of the settings are the way we want it, we can click on this Create All Maps button. Now the first thing that it will do is it'll ask for a folder to export in. Let me back up real quick and show you that the subtool, I actually named it Interesting Object by clicking this Rename button down here. When you go to export the maps, it is going to use that name as the default for all of the start of the different map files that it's going to create. And it says here that it's saving a TIFF file, but it's actually not going to save any file with that exact name. That's just an example that it's going to use for creating the other files. I've got it here in my ZBrush demo project under the assets. I've got a model folder for it. You'll definitely want to create a separate folder for each object that you export this way because it'll save off several maps. You can always organize those later when you're getting ready to publish things. Let's go ahead and click Save. And now it's going to go to work. So it's basically going to automate the process of flipping the detail levels around as needed to create the maps. And now it's up to the ambient occlusion map part, which seems to take a good little bit of time, which is probably why I'll edit this out. And there we go. It's finally done. It says all maps created and exported, time taken 1 minute 55 seconds. That seems about right for what it did. Sometimes I think that time is way off. I'm not quite sure how it calculates that. Other times it seems like it's okay. So here we have our model back, just the way it was before. Now if I'm going to go ahead and jump into Unity3D, and we'll see what we've got. And now we're into Unity3D. I already created an empty project for this, just so it's easy to see what is going on here. And I've already got it opened up to the assets folder, this model folder that I created for it. And here we have it created a materials folder. It created several other files as well, a material file. This goes along with the OBJ format that it saved it as, which doesn't really get used. Here's the thing we're interested in most, though, is that Unity went ahead and created a prefab for it. So there we have our prefab. And we have our three maps. We have the ambient occlusion, the normal map, and the texture map. So the next thing that you would do is pull this into the scene. And let's hit the F key and focus on it. Now, of course, if you do things in exactly the way that I did, which is actually very likely because the way the buttons are arranged and the way the workflow goes is the main way you first jump into it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is upside down. How annoying is that? I don't want an upside down object. So let me explain why that is, and we will fix it. Let me go ahead and erase that. I am actually going to re-export that, so I'm going to erase all of these files. Yes, delete. So coming back into ZBrush here, we have our model. If I go into the plugin and I'm wondering what was it that made that come out wrong, well, I'm not going to find anything here. Everything, all the settings seem pretty good. The one thing that you have to take into account is that if you go over into Preferences, there's the Import Export, and it has some settings that are usually set by default. They may be different than this. The thing that I found works best is just to come over here first and clear all of those, so that there's no flipping of anything going on, and control all of your flipping of any maps that is needed over here. So I've turned that off. Let's go back in. Let's do a create all maps. Yes, interesting object. So once again, we have all maps exported. Let's flip back over into Unity and see what's happening here. So it just imported the objects. Now let's pull this out. And there we go. You can see that the model is right side up. That was one of the main things I did, even though it was a doodle, was to make it something so that you could easily tell if it was right side up or not. It's already got a default material on it here. Of course, we'd probably actually want to rename this and do something with it or create another one. I'm going to go ahead and grab this texture map and put it in the albedo. Oh, so we see here that once again things are not quite right. Why is that? Well, we've got one more thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this back out. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. Let's go back into ZBrush. One last thing, go to our ZPlugin, and what we need to do is flip all maps vertically. That's just the way it is. Between ZBrush and Unity3D, they all need to be flipped. Now let's go through the process one more time. Okay, here we go, and we're magically back again where it's finished. Let's import that into Unity and start over here. Drag our object out. There's our object. You'll have to forgive my clicks. I'm actually using a pen, which a tablet pen does not work the best on Unity3D. It works great with ZBrush, but I actually prefer a mouse. There we go. Now we can easily see the arrows are pointing in the right direction. Things are mapped correctly. So let's go ahead and put in, get back to our map here, ambient occlusion. There we go, the lighting, a little bit of lighting there, and our normal map. Of course, if you've had any experience with normal maps in Unity and exporting them, you know that when they first come in, they're not quite right for Unity, so you have to hit that fix button. And there we go. There's the basics for it. This should be enough to get you started. The process also works the same way. I might make another tutorial to show how to take assets that were already created in another package in Unity and bring them into ZBrush and edit them. There's a few things you have to do differently than you would normally when you do that, but it can make for a really nice creative workflow. Thanks for watching and happy creating.